We want to keep the case alive and in front of people. I believe it can be solved.
For nearly 3 decades, the JonBenet Ramsey case has haunted America. A 6-year-old beauty queen found dead in her own home, a ransom note demanding the exact amount of her father's Christmas bonus, and a crime scene that raised more questions than answers. Through it all, John Ramsey, the man at the center of the storm, remained largely silent. But now, after 28 years, he has broken his silence, and what he revealed has left the world stunned. JonBenet Ramsey. To the public, his name has become inseparable from one of the most haunting, unsolved crimes in American history. But before that night in December 1996, he was not a face on the news. He was a builder of companies, a decorated Navy officer, and a man who seemed to have it all. Born in Lincoln, Nebraska, he worked his way through Michigan State University, first earning a degree in electrical engineering, then sharpening his business skills with an MBA. He wore the discipline of his military years proudly. 3 years in the Philippines with the Civil Engineer Corps and nearly a decade more in the Naval Reserve. The kind of man who seemed steady, grounded, a quiet success story. By the early 1990s, John had transformed a modest tech startup into Access Graphics, a company so successful it pulled in over $1 billion in revenue by 1996. Weeks before Christmas, he pocketed a $118,000 bonus, the same eerie figure that would later appear on the ransom note found in his home. That same year, he was celebrated as Entrepreneur of the Year by Boulder's Chamber of Commerce, his wealth estimated in the millions. On the surface, it was the perfect picture. A mansion in Boulder, a pilot's license with 2 private planes at his disposal, a wife who had once worn a beauty queen's crown, and children who carried the sparkle of promise. But beneath the polished image, tragedy had already carved deep scars. 4 years earlier, his eldest daughter Elizabeth had been killed in a car crash at just 22. It was a loss most men would never recover from, and yet here John was, pushing forward, still building, still appearing in control. His family's life, marked by elegance and privilege, was also shadowed by sorrow that rarely made headlines. The world saw him as a businessman and father, but behind the mansion's walls, was he only a grieving man who would soon face another unthinkable loss? Or was he a figure who knew more than he ever let on? By the winter of 1996, the Ramseys looked like the embodiment of the American dream. Their sprawling Boulder home on 15th Street was more than just a house. It was a symbol. Chandeliers, grand staircases, Christmas decorations strung with care, every detail whispered wealth and success. John had risen to the top of his industry. Patsy was the charismatic socialite, and their children, Burke and JonBenet, filled the home with the kind of energy that neighbors admired. Holidays in the Ramsey household were never small affairs. Friends, business associates, and members of Boulder's elite filled their guest lists. That December, they hosted a festive gathering with 30 to 40 people, complete with laughter, gingerbread houses, and even a Santa impersonator. Days later, JonBenet herself would wear a gold bracelet her mother gave her, engraved with her name and Christmas Day's date, a gift that would tragically become a grim keepsake. And then there was JonBenet, the child who drew attention everywhere she went. With blonde curls, bright eyes, and a smile rehearsed for the pageant stage, she was her mother's pride and her father's joy. John wasn't the kind of dad to stay distant. He was there at rehearsals, at performances, smiling in the front row with a camcorder in hand. Behind the scenes, the family attended church events, mingled with friends like Fleet and Priscilla White, and projected the perfect image of unity and grace. But perfection is a fragile mask. Every carefully placed detail, the bracelet, the holiday parties, the glitter of pageants, would soon take on a darker meaning, because behind the lights and decorations, shadows were waiting. ready to turn this picture-perfect family into the centerpiece of America's most chilling mystery.
The days leading up to Christmas in 1996 were a whirlwind for the Ramseys. On December 23rd, they attended a holiday party at the home of their close friends Fleet and Priscilla White. It was a night of laughter, carols, and champagne, a comfortable space among Boulder's elite. 2 nights later, the Ramseys hosted their own party. 30 or more guests filled the home, children in festive sweaters, adults chatting under the glow of holiday lights. The air smelled of cookies and pine, the warmth of tradition echoing through every room. One guest stood out, Bill McReynolds, dressed as Santa Claus. He wasn't just a hired entertainer, he was a friend of the family. His presence delighted the children, but years later, his role would be revisited with a chilling curiosity. That night, Patsy gave JonBenet a delicate gold bracelet engraved with her name and the date, December 25, 1996. It was meant as a keepsake, a small token of love. But in hindsight, it felt like a symbol carved in time, hauntingly final. Meanwhile, John had travel plans in motion. The Ramseys owned a vacation home in Charlevoix, Michigan, and the day after Christmas, they were scheduled to fly out. As a licensed pilot, John had arranged to fly his family himself. It was supposed to be the continuation of their holiday celebrations, a blending of wealth, family, and tradition. On the surface, everything sparkled: parties, gifts, and travel plans. But beneath it all, time was ticking. In just hours, this home, filled with music and laughter, would become a crime scene, and one discovery in the basement would change everything forever. December 25, 1996 began like a scene from a holiday postcard. JonBenet, dressed in a black and white outfit, showed off her bracelet to relatives as the family opened presents around the tree. There were friends in attendance, including members of the White family and others from their close circle. Laughter, snapshots, and holiday cheer painted the day as ordinary, even perfect. But that evening, something strange happened. At 6:48 p.m., a 911 call was placed from the Ramsey home. The call cut off before anyone spoke, and when dispatchers called back, no one answered. A patrol officer was sent to check, but a family friend assured him it was likely just a misdial, maybe someone trying to order medication for an older relative. The officer left without filing a report. Looking back, it was the first crack in the holiday facade, an overlooked warning sign that would only deepen suspicion later. That night, JonBenet was reportedly tucked into bed by John after the excitement of the day. Some investigators believe she may have eaten pineapple before she fell asleep, an odd detail since both John and Patsy denied giving her any. A bowl of pineapple would later be found in the kitchen, with Burke's fingerprints on it, adding another puzzle piece to the timeline. By the time the house fell quiet, the family seemed ready for their trip to Michigan the next morning. But as the Christmas lights glowed over the neighborhood, something unthinkable was already in motion. And before dawn, Boulder would awaken to a nightmare that would never fade. December 26th began before sunrise. Patsy Ramsey came downstairs around 5:30 a.m., planning to make coffee before the family's scheduled flight to Michigan. Instead, she found her daughter's bed empty. Panic set in instantly. Moments later, on the back staircase, she discovered something chilling: a handwritten ransom note, 3 pages long. This wasn't a typical ransom. Most ransom demands are blunt, a few lines at most. This one read like a twisted performance, filled with odd phrasing and dramatic instructions. And at its center was a demand for $118,000, the exact amount of John's Christmas bonus awarded just days earlier. The specificity felt too personal, too precise, as if the writer knew far more about the family than an outsider ever should. At 5:52 p.m., Patsy dialed 911. But her call didn't sound like a mother in shock. Instead of crying out that her daughter was gone, she began by calmly giving her address. She spoke of a kidnapping, not "my child," focusing more on the note than on JonBenet. Investigators later replayed the tape and noticed her repeated pleas sounded oddly rehearsed, and even after she hung up, faint voices were caught in the background, voices that some claimed included John, and possibly even Burke. Within minutes, police arrived. John handed over the ransom note and appeared cooperative, but then did something that would haunt the case forever. He called friends and family to come to the house. Soon, neighbors were walking through the kitchen, touching counters, moving items, and comforting Patsy. What should have been a sealed crime scene became a revolving door of contamination. And yet, through all the chaos, one question lingered. If JonBenet had truly been kidnapped, why was her body still inside the house? By mid-morning on December 26th, the Ramsey home was crawling with officers, but strangely, the search was incomplete. Detectives focused on the ransom angle, waiting for a kidnapper's call that never came. Hours passed, friends continued arriving, and evidence was quietly destroyed by well-meaning visitors. Investigators later admitted those first hours may have doomed the entire case.
It wasn't until early afternoon that Detective Linda Arndt, frustrated by the lack of progress, asked John Ramsey and his friend Fleet White to check the house once more. John went straight to the basement. Not just anywhere in the basement, but to a small storage room at the far end, a dark corner rarely used. There, under a white blanket, he found JonBenet. She was lying on the floor with duct tape over her mouth and a garrote fashioned from one of Patsy's paintbrushes around her neck. Her small body showed signs of strangulation, a fractured skull, and possible sexual assault. In shock, John lifted her into his arms and carried her upstairs, placing her near the family's Christmas tree. To him, it was instinct, a father grabbing his daughter. But to investigators, it was the fatal disruption of a crime scene. Fingerprints, DNA, and the original positioning of the body were forever lost. Detective Arndt later recalled the moment John carried JonBenet's body. She described a chilling silence in his eyes, a moment of wordless recognition that unsettled her for decades. And so, what should have been the key to solving the mystery became the start of 1,000 more questions. Why did John head straight for that hidden room, and how did he know where to look? The autopsy on JonBenet revealed the brutality of what happened that night. Cause of death was listed as strangulation, but there was also a skull fracture so severe it could have killed her on its own. She had been struck on the head and then strangled with a homemade garrote, a cord tightened with the broken handle of one of Patsy's paintbrushes. There were other disturbing details. Her body showed signs of sexual trauma, though no semen was found. Some experts suggested penetration with a foreign object. Others questioned whether chronic abuse might have been involved. The crime scene itself offered conflicting evidence: duct tape, rope, and a white blanket covering her body. Experts later noted that covering a victim often points to shame or familiarity, as if the killer both knew her and couldn't face what they had done. And then there was the pineapple. JonBenet's stomach contained partially digested pineapple, placing the time of consumption between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Yet both John and Patsy insisted she hadn't eaten anything that night. On the kitchen counter sat a bowl of pineapple, Burke's fingerprints on the dish. He was 9 years old at the time, said to be asleep through the chaos, yet his presence on that evidence kept suspicion alive. Even stranger, investigators recovered unidentified male DNA on JonBenet's underwear, leggings, and beneath her fingernails. It didn't match John, Patsy, or Burke. It didn't match anyone in the FBI's database. It was a mystery strand of evidence, both damning and inconclusive. Every clue pulled investigators in two directions: inside the house, toward the family, and outside, toward an unknown intruder. Which path led to the truth? From the very beginning, the case split in two. On one side were investigators who believed the answer lay within the Ramsey home. On the other, those convinced a shadowy outsider slipped in unnoticed. The case against the family seemed compelling. The ransom note, written on paper from Patsy's own notepad, in handwriting eerily close to hers. The strange behavior during the 911 call, calm when panic should have ruled, rehearsed where raw fear should have shown. The pineapple that pointed to late-night activity inside the house, and the fact that JonBenet was discovered not by police, but by her own father in a hidden basement room. For skeptics, it all felt staged, like a cover-up too elaborate to ignore. But the intruder theory carried weight as well. The broken basement window John admitted to breaking months earlier could have served as an entry point. A rope was found in a guest room, unfamiliar to anyone in the family. A boot print in the basement matched no shoes in the house. And then there was the DNA. Unidentified, male, and present in multiple places on JonBenet's clothing and fingernails. That single fact was powerful enough that in 2008, prosecutors went as far as publicly clearing the Ramsey family. Two theories, both lined with evidence, both riddled with holes. And as the years passed, suspicion didn't fade, it only grew louder. But in 1999, a secret move by a grand jury would throw everything into question. As the investigation stumbled, the media filled the gaps. By the late 1990s, JonBenet's face was everywhere. Tabloids, television specials, late-night talk shows. The Ramseys were either grieving parents trapped in a nightmare or masterminds of a cover-up. The public chose sides, and the family lived under a shadow of suspicion. Behind closed doors, a Boulder County grand jury convened in 1999. After reviewing evidence, they voted to indict both John and Patsy for child abuse resulting in death. But the district attorney refused to sign the indictment, saying the case was too weak to move forward. For over a decade, the world never knew. Only in 2013 were the documents unsealed, revealing just how close the Ramseys had come to trial. Tragedy didn't stop with JonBenet. In 2006, Patsy Ramsey lost her battle with ovarian cancer, dying at 49. She went to her grave proclaiming her innocence. For John, it was another devastating blow. He had already buried one daughter in a car crash, now another to violence, and a wife to illness. Meanwhile, Burke, the quiet 9-year-old who had been shielded from the media storm, grew into adulthood under suspicion. In 2016, he broke his silence on Dr. Phil, defending himself against accusations. When a CBS documentary suggested he may have played a role, Burke sued for defamation and eventually won a settlement. But the spotlight never left John. Even when he ran for office in Michigan in 2004, voters saw him less as a businessman and more as the father at the center of America's darkest mystery. And decades later, he would make one more push to find the truth, turning to the one tool that had changed criminal investigations forever: DNA. Nearly 28 years have passed since JonBenet's body was found in that dark basement room, yet the case refuses to fade. Advances in forensic science have changed what's possible, and John Ramsey has not stopped fighting. In recent years, he has pressed authorities to allow new genealogical DNA testing, the same kind that unmasked the Golden State Killer. He believes those unidentified male DNA samples left behind on her daughter's clothing and beneath her fingernails hold the key to unlocking the truth. But frustration lingers. Colorado investigators have been criticized for refusing outside help, insisting the evidence remains under their control. For John, every delay feels like another year of justice denied. He has lost 3 children and his wife, endured accusations from the public, and carried the weight of unanswered questions longer than most men could bear. And still he insists he wants the real killer found. Yet the contradictions remain: the ransom note written inside the house, the pineapple, the broken window, the blanket, the DNA. Each piece of evidence tells 2 stories at once, leaving a puzzle that seems designed never to be solved. And so, after 28 years, John Ramsey has broken his silence. His grief, his anger, and his demand for answers have reignited the mystery. But the question that has haunted America since Christmas 1996 still stands. Was JonBenet killed by someone inside the house, or by a stranger who slipped through the night and vanished forever?